So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on shaping the future of work and learning in international perspective. My name is Matthias Rumpf. I'm your host today, and I'm also the deputy head of the OECD Berlin Center. And this is a joint event of the OECD Berlin Center and the Platform Industrie 4.0 of the federal government, which is sponsored by the federal government in Germany. And it brings together business, trade unions, and civil society in Germany to advance the digitalization and the future of manufacturing. The platform itself has a strong technical background. It looks into standards and how to organize digital factories and so on. But it also has a component which looks into the impact on employees and labor relations of the digital wave, which we are expecting in manufacturing to come in the coming years. And this part is going to be the focus of our discussion today. And the reason for this is because the charter, the platform produced a charter on work and learning in Industry 4.0, which has been published today and handed over to the federal government. And this is kind of the context of the event we are having today. And let me, here you can see an image on how the charter has been handed over today. You can see it's been it's like all these events, a digital event. You can see two state secretaries, I think, waving the charter, Mr. Müller and Mr. Nussbaum, I think. Yeah, here he is. So you can see both of them. So they received the charter, and we have now the pleasure to discuss a little bit its implications and look at it from an international perspective. So let me introduce to you our panel today. I'm joined by my colleague, Sandrine Cazès. She's a senior economist at the OECD in Paris, and she is running a program which looks specifically at the role of social partners and in labor market policies. And she will give us, I think, a little bit of an analytical background on the topic today. I'm also joined by Julia Görlitz. She's the chair of the working group within the Platform Industrie 4.0, which has produced the charter, which is the basis of our discussion. And she's also a political secretary at the IG Metall, which is the German metal workers union. And she's based in Berlin. So hello, Julia. We're also joined by Valentina Orazzini. She comes from the Italian Federation of Metal Workers, where she is working at the European department. Hello, Valentina. And last but not least, we are joined by Barbara Sudykowska. She's a labor law expert at the National Committee of the Polish trade union Solidarność. Hello, Barbara. Welcome to this panel. We will discuss among ourselves a little bit, but we'd also like to have all of you who joined today included in the discussion. So please send us your questions, your comments in the chat. You can also raise your hand in the webinar tool. It's at the bottom. You see, I think most of you will be familiar with those tools these days. So you have the chat and the raise hand function, and we will try to give you the floor if we manage technically, or maybe just to read out your questions during the session. But let me start first with sort of a first question to Julia, and I would like to ask her to very briefly summarize for us a little bit the content of the charter and also the making of the charter, because the charter has been the product of so the work of social partners in action. So that is the important component, but maybe give us a little bit of an overview on what we can find in the charter and how it has been produced. Julia, please.
Well, thank you, Matthias. First of all, I'm very delighted to be here today. Thank you you can see here the four statements. Basically, that's the heart of our charter. And maybe for your background, it's important what we like to achieve with the charter. And I like the charter to start a debate about the values that guide us successfully through the fundamental shifts and challenges of the digital transformation of the world of work. And as you can see here in these 4 statements, the charter reflects the values of the German Plattform Industrie 4.0. And I'd like to point out 2 core beliefs to summarize briefly the 4 statements in my own words, let's say. So firstly, we believe that innovative and sustainable working arrangements are key to a competitive manufacturing industry, including lifelong learning, a modern leadership culture, and agile working methods as a response to constantly changing economic conditions. And secondly, we believe that designing the future of industry with the people and for the benefits of the people is only possible through a collective dialogue premised on social partnership, and therefore a greater autonomy and participation of the workforce and their representatives is needed in company change processes. That's short enough for you, Matthias?
Yeah, it's perfect. That's totally perfect. But maybe let's just a quick follow-up. As you are representative from the trade unions, and how did you see the relationship? How did you see the work relationship while creating or writing this charter? Was this what was the process like working with industry representatives and trade unions to come up with such a document?
Well, it was quite challenging. Where we have, as you know, you are a member of the working group yourself. We have representatives of the unions, of the or people who are responsible for human resources or for further training in their own company. So there are a lot of different perspectives, and we brought them all together. There were some issues that we had to discuss this several times, and in the end, we found a kind of compromise, let's say, as it's like often we speak about compromises. But I'm very happy with the result. Is this the answer to your question, Matthias?
Absolutely, but also maybe just taking it a step further. Now it has been handed over to the government, and what else? What do you expect as a next step? What should happen with this initiative now?
Well, I invite everybody to start a debate, as I mentioned before, to discuss this, and the most important is to bring it to life. We have these 4 statements. Maybe you cannot start with every single point in the everyday working life, but take maybe one thing you can improve based on our values, and then move on. I would love to have feedback over the next weeks or months, how this is working, and maybe well, this is still an option that we adopt, that we rewrite maybe some statements of the charter. But I think that we, for a start, the document is a very successful story.
Perfect. We'll come back to this, but now I would like to turn to my colleague Sandrine Casses to see a little bit, to put this into an international perspective. I mean, you've been looking at social partners and labor relations for all the OECD countries and also beyond, and I think you've identified ways of collaboration which have been productive and also ways which have been less productive. If you would have to comment on this initiative, how do you see it from the perspective of your research?
Thank you, Matthias, and good afternoon to all. Yes, indeed, we've been looking at the OECD, at the role of social dialogue, social partners, and collective bargaining on the functioning of the labor market. And we came up with quite a strong conclusion in our recent flagship, Untitled Negotiating Our Way Up, that actually we launched in Berlin, I think a year ago or something like that. And we found that collective bargaining and social dialogue can be instrumental, really, in easing transition in the labor markets. So collective bargaining, social dialogue, very important for well-functioning labor markets, but also in the changing world of work, absolutely important instruments. If, and that's quite important, if relationships are based on mutual trust between social partners, and also if designed in a way that interests are balanced. So if they manage to combine at the same time flexibility and security. For instance, so we look at the different ways social dialogue and social partners can actually have an impact. As you know, they can do it through raising voices, informing, advising, etc., but also through negotiating compromises. So through collective bargaining, but also through monitoring and compliance activities. So in particular, what we found in this whole issue about, changing world of work, where new forms of work are developing and spreading, etc., we found, for instance, that social dialogue can help firms adopting new technology, so adjust to new digital changes, etc., but also new forms of work organization. And I think that's what we are also discussing today. And they can do so discussing it at a more local level. And that's quite important to tailor actually the conditions in a more flexible, maybe and fair manner than regulation. That was the first point. We also found that another important things is that through collective bargaining, social dialogue and social partners can shape and design new rights. That's also important. For instance, this whole discussion about the right to disconnect, for instance, or improve existing ones, right? Access to training, how to balance working time, work and personal activities, etc. And finally, because I don't want to be too long, we also found that collective bargaining and social dialogue also extremely important to complement government's efforts in strengthening labor market security and adaptability. So really a very strong message. So what I can see from this initiative that you just presented is all this this question of helping both workers and firms to ease transition in a changing world of work.
Great, thank you so much, Sandrine. Valentina, let me turn to you for sort of a perspective from Italy. I think the Italian industry, correct me if I'm wrong, has very much in common with the German industry. You have large companies, but you also have this very strong SME companies, which are probably as competitive as the Germans are, German companies are. First of all, I would like to ask you how in your country is this future of manufacturing or industry 4.0 is debated? How does it work? How does it work in a more broader perspective, but also from a labor relations perspective? Are you as a representative from the trade union or trade unions, are they involved in the discussion in the same way Julia is from IG Metall?
Thank you very much, Matthias, for the invitation. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Also because, I take the occasion because it's a very important, the presentation of the charter today is a very important issue, because I think that gives the idea of a possible way of action at the European floor, because I think this could be an instrument that inspire, I think, the social dialogue at the European floor, because actually what happens in the transformation of the the labor market, and the industry, of course, is something that is cross-country at the moment. As has been said already, our countries are very linked in terms of manufacturing, at least. So, of course, the transformation of the industry will impact, I would say, also other countries. Unfortunately, I have to say that the level of discussion with the government is not so in deep as the German one, as the German example, because, of course, you have been working on these tripartite approach, so from a very long time. So I know from my colleagues of Ig-Metall, since when the Industry 4.0, the Platform 4.0 was based, and the discussion you have with the university and researchers, companies, of course, with the social partners and the government. Unfortunately, I have to say that in Italy, is not the level of official discussion, but what we were able to achieve so far, of course, it's a role of discussion with the companies via the collective bargaining. As Sandrine has already been said, the collective bargaining is crucial in this phase, because of course the transition, it has always been not neutral. If we look at the industrial revolution we get, the second and the third, was in a certain sense, we had a neutral aspect of the technologies, and now we look at the technology as if it could be inclusive itself, but it is not the case. I mean, it becomes inclusive inside and outside, I would say, the labor market, only if we can negotiate it and share and discuss about the priorities. So I see a role for the social partner, not simply in, and this is very important and crucial, what has been said, the fact to negotiating and discussing new rights, or how to update a new way of working, but it's also in defining the priorities. The priorities, because as has been said, the process is not neutral, and the objective is not the transformation itself, of course, but what we're going to transform, even the sense of the process and the sense of the product. So I think there is a very big, I would say, space to discuss together, because as big as we can open democratically the process, as better we will achieve also the objective, even from the industrial perspective, but also for the labor, and I would say for the citizens, of course, the end of the process. But I think we will have more time.
Maybe just a quick follow-up question, also based on what Sandrine said regarding the importance of trust and the balance of interests. Is this something that is sort of part of the discussion, or do you see this in the discussion in Italy as well, those two elements? Because if I look at the German example, I think there has been this balance, and the charter is probably an expression of such a balance in a way.
But if I may be very direct on this point, well, I think it's helpful. I think that
please be direct. That's why we're here.
I think the difference is being done. It's given by the role of the government, I would say, because when it comes with the relation of companies and social dialogue, we have a very strong relation on that floor. I mean, we have our collective agreement and collective bargaining of the national end, second agreement, that means it gives up the floor to come into the discussion in company examples and cases. But what is the lack in Italy is to have, I mean, in a more continuative way, a place offered by the institution in which we can together have an experiment and a discussion based on this mutual trust. So I think that also the event that have given a discontinuity in the political situation in Italy has not helped the situation. So I see this point of mutual trust and willingness also to work it closer together, which is also inside that I can discuss it about it a little bit later, what we have improved in our negotiation. But what we see, it's a little bit the lack of an institutional place where to discuss it together, also the institution. It's more this one, the lack.
Okay. Well, thank you. So let me turn to Barbara from a sort of a Polish perspective from Poland. I think the industry has also a slightly different structure. There's, if you look at it from a German perspective, there's strong connections as well as there is with Italy, but maybe in a sort of a slightly different shape and form. I think maybe I would say the relation with Italy is in a form more balanced, while in Poland you have a lot of German companies which have invested in Poland. You have also Polish companies investing in Germany, but it's not in a balanced situation. How do you, first of all, how do you see sort of this process of future of manufacturing? How do you see the pros and cons from a Polish perspective? And also, what is the debate in Poland? How do social partners discuss this in Poland, this issue?
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you for the invitation for this meeting, because we are speaking about issues which are crucial from the perspective of all member states, because this technological transformation is going everywhere. You are asking me about a debate in Poland. Unfortunately, I would say that it's not enough debate about it, and there's quite a lot of reason. Generally, in Poland, the partnership between the trade union and employer organization is not as well developed as in Germany. We don't have such a strong work participation. And of course, we have some kind of the tripartite structure in Poland, social dialogue council, but at least the trade union side is not fully happy and fully with the cooperation with the government. We don't see this as a kind of fully successful story. So what is the most important from Polish perspective? Of course, skills. There's nothing new, that skills of our labor force is very important. And we can't forget that during all this digital transformation to the new technology and so on, we have also some different process connected with demographical change, with aging. This will be very important from Polish perspective, not right now, because we still have a relatively young society if you compare to other member states, but because we have a really low birth rate in the beginning of the 90s, in the time of the transformation, that it means that in the future we will have very sharp drop, or in the otherwise increase in the number of the people who are outside labor market, who are pensioners, to the people who are still on the labor market. So aging is very important from Polish perspective. And other issue which is pretty important from Polish perspective, is a little bit new for us, is the question of the migration, because for the first time Poland stopped to be a country which is sending people. Like now everybody know we have before the first war we had a big migration to the United States, or if we speak about not such old past time, big migration after 2004 to England, to Ireland. But right now, for the first time, we are a country which is not a sending country, but the host country, especially from the migrant from Ukraine. Also, not only, but population of Ukraine is that important. And it's important to have a wise management of migration, to use the skills of migrant people, not to only put them to the most simple work, because then you simply lost the skills of the people who are coming to the country. So I just want to show that there's a very many processes which are going in the same time. Of course, we also have all the question connected with the climate, with the coal, with the just transition, and this is crucial from the Polish perspective, but it's also nothing new. Probably we all know that Poland is still based on coal, and in Silesia it's a very difficult process of the just transition and transformation. So we are in the process of very dynamic changes on the labor market, and it's not so difficult, it's not so easy to manage this process, because, as I said, this level of trust and partnership in Poland is relatively low, and we have to be open about it. If you ask any kind of sociologist what is a typical feature of Polish society, he or she will say low level of trust. There are many reasons for this, historical, different reasons. We have to somehow to live with it. And of course, it means there is a great responsibility on trade union to develop collective agreement, collective negotiation. We have low level of the number of collective agreement. And maybe last sentence to finish this opening remarks. Polish trade union movement, honestly speaking, have quite a lot of hopes connected with this European Union Commission project about the directive on European minimum wage. Not so much connected with the issue of European minimum wage, not this part, but this part which is connected with the increased number of collective agreement and to push member states to develop support for social partner to conduct collective agreements.
Well, thank you. Maybe just one follow-up question, if I may. If you look at the sort of specifically at this future of manufacturing or Industry 4.0, would you think that there's more hope, or do you see people more the risk in Poland if we look at this process? It's a difficult question. It's obviously, is the glass half empty, half full?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, and you know, the other problem is that the moment in which we are speaking right now, probably if you make any kind of polls and research right now, people are very tired of the last year. People are very tired of this uncertainty connected with the COVID and so on. So probably right now the answer would be that they see more danger, more fears, and they are not looking very, let's say, optimistic. But if you look at this more from, let's say, research basic facts, Polish economy is in quite good shape. If we think about this stress factor, COVID, and this uncertainty in the next months is connected with epidemiological situation, and we have quite important. As you said at the beginning, link with the German economy. So in our both interest, it's that we both have a success story in the connection that the German success is very much a successful story on the Polish side and other ways. So I would say that generally, Polish society is right now quite divided in the political sense, in the social sense, unfortunately, but this is the description of the situation. So that's why it's a little bit difficult to answer to your question, because the answer to this question can be also connected with the political view of the person or with the background in the broader sense. In the economy of 0.40, we know about it, everybody, it will be much easier for the person with the higher level of qualification, people who participate in lifelong learning. And this is the biggest challenge, how to make people with the low qualification and people who enter labor market with relatively low level of qualification to participate in a lifelong learning, to become more multi-skill, and then it means to be more secure on the labor market.
Thank you so much. Sandrine, maybe going back to you for a second. I think Barbara already mentioned the importance she puts on the European, its regulation, or that sort of social partnership is kind of sponsored by a legal or a political will, which is in her case expressed on the European level, but I mean, we'll probably have this on the national level as well. From your research, how important is this political support for this social dialogue to happen and to move into a trust-based and balanced approach? Do we need more political support, a better sort of political environment to make this happen? Or can the social partners, if the situation is right, manage this on their own?
Thanks for your question, Matthias. Maybe if I could start from another angle, let's put it like that, which is maybe highlight the challenges we sort of find out. Because on one hand, we say social dialogue, collective bargaining matters, extremely important, etc. At the same time, we know that the industrial relations system is facing a couple of challenges, right? First one, trade union density is declining, collective bargaining coverage also declining, etc. So the environment is quite challenging. It's putting really the industrial relations system under pressure. So you may think, oh, so is social dialogue, this old lady, and that it's not relevant at all? No, we say definitely not. But then we highlight the sort of key challenges that social dialogue should be really facing. So One is this question that I mentioned before, which is about the design, right? How the system is organized. And in our research, we have compared different types of collective bargaining, let's say, functioning. As you know, it's complex, etc. I won't go into the details, but you know that there are different parameters, the levels at which collective bargaining takes place. To what extent social partners or also collective bargaining is coordinated. So the sort of type of decentralization which is in place, but still while being decentralized, you know, we know that there are some systems or kind of what we call the organized decentralization, where sectoral level bargaining is putting a sort of frame and there is room for adjustment at local level, but the whole systems is functioning well because, as I said, there are also trust between social partners, there is coordination, etc. And also importantly, and I'm coming to my second point, the system is covering, is inclusive and is reaching out sufficient number of members. And that's the second, I think, big challenge for industrial relation systems is providing access to bargaining, to collective bargaining, to these so-called non-standard workers. As we know, and we provide evidence in our report that this complexity and diversification of new forms of employment leads to the situation that a certain number of people may not be represented by unions for different reasons. I mean, we know that historically there has been this idea that trade unions have been rather concentrating, let's say, on the so-called insiders, right? Like the open-ended workers having all long-term relationship with the enterprise, etc. Why are non-standard workers less covered? There are a couple of factors behind. This could be also because there is a high turnover, so people don't feel like they should be part of trade unions. They could be maybe frightened of retaliation or things like that. So there are different factors behind this, but there is also an important factor, which is a legal factor. And what we pointed in our report that for some categories, let's say non-employees people, right? There may be self-employed workers who are self-employed, so independent in a way, but have still some characteristic as, let's say, employees or dependent workers, because they are very much dependent, let's say, platforms workers, etc., from one employer, right? We argue that for those people, that there may be access to collective bargaining should be provided. And why isn't provided? It's simply because legally, now those things are changing. If considered as self-employed, they may be prevented because this would be seen as a breach in the competition law. I don't want to get too technical, but I wanted to flag these different challenges. And the third one, and then I'm done, I think it's also important to highlight that social partners themselves have to adjust, right, to this new world of work. Adjust in the sense that maybe represent also the change strategies. I think this was mentioned by one colleague from the panel also, and see how to reach out these members, and not only unions, by the way, also employers' organizations.
Well, thank you. Well,
sorry, I was a bit longer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But I also want to remind our participants to ask questions or to raise their hands. I don't know, Lisa, Dennis, is there already someone who wants to ask a question? If not, I will, or we can take it at a later stage. But I would like to take this question to Julia, also in the context of preparing the charter. Do you think the process itself for the charter, but also if you look at a broader perspective, the process of transformation in the future of work, do you think this process is inclusive enough? And also, is the other trade unions, is the IG Metall doing its share to make it as inclusive as it should be?
I'm not quite sure, Matthias, if I understand your inclusive. Who do you want
inclusive
to include?
in that it not only includes the core workers of the companies and maybe also the bigger companies, but also the workers which are a little bit more at the margin of the labor market, be it because they have a lower skill level, be it because their contract situation in the company is not as stable as it is for core workers in bigger companies.
Well,
because they also have to manage they also have to manage, they also have to manage the transition. They also have to be taken along for this transition into the future of manufacturing.
I would like to answer your question with a little bit connection to the charter, if you don't mind. So let's talk about I call them the low-skilled workers. I hope that's a term you understand. So I think we had, I don't know if it's Valentina who said that there was a word, fear was in there. Someone spoke about fear. And I think we have, considering the low-skilled, for example, maybe people had, they have maybe unpleasant memories of the school days. So they grew up believing that the job in the automotive industry, for instance, is a job for life. So there amongst these workers, I think there is a fear of failure and the fear of change in general. So I think what I call a trustful approach maybe is necessary. So first of all, I think whoever is there who is maybe not the high skilled, someone who is looking for further training anyway without more support. I think that we need someone, maybe it's like a mentorship, someone who the people trust, and then introduce them to options. Maybe make the options, first of all, make contact, make it clear that there is a need. I think, unfortunately, there are not all of the employees, doesn't matter, maybe the qualification level. I think not all of them are aware that the further education is and training that they are important for the entire working life. So maybe that's one thing. And I think we'll have a statement in the charter too. I think we can take advantage of digitalization in this point, because I think that the digitalized offerings that we have already today, they can help to individualize learning and adjust the content and methods to the different types of learners too, because that's an important point, at least to me, and to integrate it flexibly into everyday working life so that they can see immediate results. So this is one thing. Maybe another part of your question was to the IG Metall itself. I don't know if I should answer this. For me, it's I think the unions are strong and they remain strong and they play a major role in IG Metall itself. We have supported, for example, the YouTubers union. I know this is a complete different perspective now, but it's the reaching out to other workers, other branches maybe, and maybe it's a very, my heart lies in this, but I think about the unions too as living organizations, and like every organism, they strive to survive by adapting to the changes of the environment. So I do believe they can, they have to, and they will change and, as you said, be more inclusive because they have to. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Valentina, what is the situation in Italy like? I mean, in terms of inclusiveness, Do you have the feeling when there is a discussion within the union, but also beyond, are you taking on board all the people who are working in the process who will be affected by the future of manufacturing? Or do you think that the debate is very much focused on, I don't know what a good term is, but let's say core workers, people who are part of the, the full-time employees with a certain level of formal skills? Is it very much focused on them, or are you also including the ones that Sandrine was mentioning, which are, I think one can say, a little bit at the margin of the labor market?
Got the point. Thank you for the question. And actually, Irene, about Sandrine, I also wanted to give an input about this, starting from our perspective. First of all, I would like to clarify, to try to make clear one point. I think that precarity and the fragmentation of work is not something that has happened during the way. I mean, it's not an accident. That was a choice of the reorganization of the labor market. And of course, it was not our choice, because otherwise we have the risk of describing the trade unions as this old lady in the room, incapable to deal with new forms of labor. And this is not the point. I mean, the point is that the precarity was something that has been chosen by the market in the previous years, as was chosen the attack of collective bargaining. If I see the attack that was given also by the institution, and if I see at some countries in which collective bargaining have been completely destroyed by the indication of the IMF or the European Commission as well, because there was this I would say also not clever idea that the competition should be done only on the cost of the labor or on the labor condition. And of course, this gives us the perception of making competition on other point of the transformation of the process, on the transformation of the product. If I look at my country, I see that, for instance, my organization and our confederation is doing a very big job in terms of including and organizing. If I see also other sectors, of course, which is not, I mean, that is not effectively only manufacturing, but if I see the platform workers, the riders, I mean, the effort that have been done in also with classical and non-classical instruments to organize these workers and try to give them rights. I think that the discussion, of course, is update. No, it's on the moment. It's very crucial. But I think that the idea of new components of new players inside the discussion and the fragmentation, it's also something that touch the employer side and the companies, because if I look at the way the companies were organized so far, in which also the processes and the instrument of production were owned by the companies, now you have somehow I would say small companies that are developing, the technologies, who are not owned by the company itself. So there are many small companies who are belonging the capability to change in, who are not directly linked to the owner of an industry of manufacturers, for instance. So it's not inside the ownership at the moment. So also, I think on the employer side, there is an issue of fragmentation also of which was the ownership of the transformation and the capabilities to change the way of work. So I think that this is a process who's changing both sides the scene.
Okay. We now have a few questions in the chat, actually, and we have two from Roland Schneider, but let me take the second one first. It goes to Sandrine, but if you want to answer, why not? Anyone else wants to follow up, why not? And the question reads as follows: if collective bargaining is so beneficial to both sides of industry, as suggested by the OECD report, why is it that firms and employers associations, not just in Germany, are withdrawing from the negotiations, from the negotiation table, from the dialogue? So it's Roland Schneider. He's, I should also make it.
Oh, I know Roland. Hi.
Yeah, but maybe not everybody else. Roland Schneider, he was working very long for the German Trade Union Federation and was for a long time the trade union representative at the OECD at the TUAG, which is our sort of the trade union arm of the social partner representation at the OECD. BIAC is representing the business. So, Sandrine.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a tricky and difficult question. Also, because we are also speaking like, you know, on average, OECD, etc., etc. So it's we would need to go in, of course, in country level, etc. But I think that maybe one answer is maybe because we have not yet sufficiently realized what may happen if there would be no social dialogue or no collective bargaining at all. So what is, okay, let's imagine that from now on, no collective bargaining, no social dialogue. Well, then we would see that the function that collective bargaining and social dialogue is having is absolutely crucial. Imagine you wouldn't have collective bargaining and social dialogue. Well, you may have forms of, let's say, complaints, direct voices maybe on internet, or like trying to shame reputation effect, etc. So there would be I think other ways of raising voice, concern, etc. that would be much more detrimental. So I think the point I'm trying to make is probably one may need to reflect the function that collective bargaining is having, and maybe why isn't it so let's say acknowledged. First of all, one may realize what would happen if there would be no collective bargaining and social dialogue, but maybe also because there is a need for what I was saying before, for social partners to reflect about this question of inclusivity. So we discussed a little bit from, let's say, the workers' side, and really what I wanted to say, Valentina, is not at all that it was because of, right, it's one element among others, and maybe more historically than other things, but really this question of having access to collective bargaining for these categories in the gray zone is a tricky one, and that's really, I mean, something where trade unions have started to engage, right? With, first of all, okay, let's see with whether there is a question of misclassification, and if not, let's see how to represent these categories, so on-account workers, self-employed who are like in a way vulnerable, etc. And that's, I know that the Commission is taking this extremely seriously and engaging into that question. But I think what I wanted to say also is also because we are here with, let's say, one part of the actors, the unions, but employers as well. And I think here also it's important that we need to be two to play tango. And the same way, the question of also representing the interest, let's say, of small enterprise is also another important issue. So I think this idea of representing, having a broad coverage, but also representing all actors. And maybe from the employer side, the situation has been more on, okay, that's the big companies, etc. But what about the small enterprises?
Barbara, maybe just out of curiosity, how does it work in Poland? I mean, in terms of employer representation, does it, is this, are they well represented? Are they taking part in the social dialogue, or is this more of a problem?
Okay, I will say a couple of words about employers, but maybe first, we've been speaking about the inclusiveness of trade union movement. Of course, it's crucial, it's important. A trade union, also Polish trade union, also Solidarność should be more open to the people working in service sector, more open to the young people, to the women. Yes, of course it's, but we have to look at this from, let's say, full perspective. And it's also important that the trade union have access to the workplace. And for instance, from Polish perspective, this is not an obvious issue. Very often there is a very strong opposition from the employer to any kind of the access of people working in trade union who are trying to get new members. There is problem of the access of the trade union lawyers or generally trade union experts during negotiation. Very often Polish employers are telling that this is a third party. There's a question of business confidentiality and so on, and the trade union need this kind of the legal support or different kind of support during the negotiation. So this whole picture, and in this whole picture, if you have very high level of union busting, it's very hard to believe that in this generally difficult time of globalization and so on, trade union will be able to really increase the density, especially in the country like Poland, where we have never high level of trade union density. It's not a question of coming back. I'm not speaking about the communist time because it doesn't make sense that trade union was not a trade union in the sense that we use the word during this discussion. So it's not a question of coming back to high density, higher density, but it's a building of proper density. This is a different story. And one more thing, of course, I know that the trade union should be open to people who are self-employed, who are dependent from one contractor, should be open to people who are working to the temporary work agency, should be put a lot of pressure in the digital platform economy, trying to organize the riders, trying to organize different person working to the platforms. But that must be some kind of the framework. And for instance, from the Polish perspective, if you have extremely lower level of the social security for self-employed person, if you compare the level of the social security, if you are in the labor relation, the pushing factor for the bogus self-employment is so high that you can't, from my perspective, answer it differently, that you have to have the change of the public policy and make this labor cost more balanced, because otherwise it's simply impossible just to believe that we are able to do it through the social dialogue, collective agreements. And now this is some basic issue about the labor market, and this is the question of the public authority and their vision of the labor market. And unfortunately, you have to be honest, all the governments, it's not the question of this government or in Poland or the former one and so on, but one of the ideas is low labor cost. Low labor cost is a way how the Polish economy can be competitive in the European Union, and you have to be open that this is a clear idea that you can see openly said by many Polish governments. So you ask about employer organization. What can I say? The crucial from Polish perspective is that you need two to tango, and the level of organization of Polish employer is even lower than of Polish employees. So we always speak about the trade union density, but the really problem in Poland is, especially on the sectoral level, very often trade union don't have employer organization as a partner. There's a kind of a lobbying organization that even from the strictly legal perspective are not able to be a part of a collective agreement. So when the trade union are asking to start the negotiation, they are simply speaking, no, we can't negotiate with you. We are not employer organization. We can show you this is just a different type of organization. We cannot be a part of collective agreement. So even at this really basic, let's say, moment of start to discuss on the sectoral level, it's very often very hard. And we can just look to the statistic. We simply in Poland lack any kind of sectoral collective agreement in the private sector. So I think this is very bad factor when we speak about this perspective of the digital transformation, because in this area, in the area connected with education, qualification, and so on, question, for instance, right to disconnect and so on, very often it's very good way to organize to some things on sectoral level. And in Poland, it's very difficult because we have very low level of organization of employer. And honestly speaking, because probably you can ask me what to do, I don't know. Simply, I don't know. I can't imagine what kind of, let's say, you have a carrot, at what kind of the carrot the government can give to the employers to make them more willing to organize themselves. Of course, we can say that employer organizations should be more inclusive, but this is how they are business, and it's hard for me to answer what kind of the policy they can make to gain new members.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, we have now looked a little bit at the challenges of social partnership in this transformation, and the challenges are coming actually from, you know, they are there despite, without even this transition taking place. Let's go back a little bit for the end, because we don't have that much time left, to the question, because we have two questions in the chat which are going in a little bit the same direction about low-skilled workers and how they can be helped to be guided through the transition. So one question is from Emily Borchert. I'll read it out to you. But aren't there low-skilled workers that the ones that will be most affected by automatization? Will there not always be a group of low-skilled people, and what is their space in Industry 4.0? I think the question is about as we are moving to a higher level of automation, what will happen to people who will not be able, who have difficulty to adapt, and who might not be necessary in the factory of the future? We don't know. So what is your take on this? I mean, Julia, maybe you want to come in, because that's part of that's in a sense also at the heart of the charter. What will happen to maybe let's put it a little bit broader, the question. I mean, we have looked at, I think at the charter and the process, we have looked at a lot of retraining within the company to help people to adjust to the changing needs in a company. But this is only one part of the transition that will take place. Some of the transition will also take place by companies being removed or exiting the market and new companies coming in. So people will also have to change jobs. How do we help? How do we balance between the protection of jobs and the protection of workers, and particularly for those who might not have the high skill level to adapt by their own?
Yeah, well, this is
a difficult one.
It is. I wish I had the answer to this when it comes to protecting jobs or protecting people. You know, from my very personal point of view, I would say protect people by any means. This is more the approach, like leave no one behind. And I know this is maybe wishful thinking. I don't know. I hope there is a way from unionist perspective, though, safeguarding location and employment, especially in the heavy unionized workplaces, is the most important thing at the moment. This is the German perspective. Well, I'm afraid that this, as you said, Matthias, I think you said, you mean it, that job mobility and constant retraining and job rotation will be on everyone's agenda. I guess it's about time, really about time to think about what we can do. And maybe there's only a certain limit within the company with what you can gain with retraining and upskilling and whatever means you have. Maybe it's really a cross-sector challenge. Maybe the others have an idea how we can protect the people. And maybe it's a way of that we have new ways of recognition of professional qualifications, for example, regardless of the specific employers, or something that you it makes it easier not stick to one job, to one workplace or company, but to make it a normal, less awkward thing, like to move from one company, from one employer to the other, keep maybe some benefits, have your job qualifications recognized. And I think this kind of flexibility we should lose maybe the fear of this. I mean, I don't know how to communicate this to people who really are afraid of losing the job by automation within the next couple of weeks or years.
Barbara already, thank you, Julia. Barbara already mentioned the challenge of the demography, but there I want to take the question to Valentina, because Italy is also a fast aging country in the same realm as Germany, maybe a bit further ahead. How do you discuss this? I mean, what is, I mean, the challenge of retraining? It poses itself differently in a country where people are getting older and older. Everybody's getting older, but where the population is getting older. How do you see this in Italy? How does it work? Is there sort of the protection? Are you focusing on protecting jobs, or are you protecting people and help them to move to different jobs if necessary?
I would say that we are focused on both of them, because what is complicated and it probably have the risk to create the perfect storm is the fact that via the reform of the pension scheme, of course, you are an increase of the age of retirement on one side and an increase of youth unemployment on the other. Mm-hmm. So if you see these two phenomena together, of course, they create a perfect mix of course, precariousness in a sense, and I mean, it's really a big social problem. So the issue, I don't think it's only the protection of work, of jobs. I mean, this is of course something that I have taken into mind when it comes to the transformation of the industry and the labor market, because of course, and there it's also interesting discussing about how the process is changing, because we are discussing about the fact that many jobs are now being destroyed and new that have been created. But it's also interesting to discuss about which one has been created and which one have been lost. And if I make an example very, very concrete, if I look at a steel company, for instance, we haven't discussed what are the working places who have to be destroyed. Because if I look at the process and if I look at those who are now cleaning the ladle furnace, this is not a place who have been destroyed, and we really want it to be destroyed because it's one of the more risky. So when I say that this is not a process who is neutral, it's because we don't simply have to look at of the amount of the places that must changes, but also the one that must be changes, because of course there are one who are more risky. And I think that if these places will somehow disappear and we will create the new one, that it's important. But if at the end of the process I will remain with low skill jobs and more risky one, and we have somehow destroyed the medium or the high skilled one, that's a double problem somehow. What we are doing so far, trying to give an answer also in that perspective, is inside our national collective agreements, we managed to handle the right to training as an individual right. That means that everyone has the right during the years to have at least 8 hours of trainings, and this is something that gives an instrument also to look over the needs of the people in the working places. And I think also there are some things that we have to learn about the situation we have been facing, and I refer to COVID. During the COVID, we were able, via protocols, also to discuss how to rearrange the working places. And I think that this is something, a knowledge that must be recognized to the workers, that must also remain behind when we discuss about participation. They were enough strong to discuss with the employers how to rearrange the working places to achieve the distanciation and so far, and to work safely, and also so to have this sort of participation even for the future, also allowed to describe which jobs. And last thing, so what was important and we introduced as an emergency tool during this situation was a fund financed by the state, who was given the possibility to train workers up to 250 hours per people during the year, who were financed by the state. So it's a sort of, partial, of temporary unemployment scheme, but it was a positive one because it was linked to training. And it's also something that we have to think for the transformation and also for the process of the transformation of the workforce. So we have to have some crucial instruments that are also co-founded by the states, and that would be also European debate about it, about what we can think for the retraining of the people and to protect their jobs and their employability.
Okay, thank you. Well, that opens just another debate on how to best organize the retraining and lifelong learning. We will, by the way, have a report next week. We're just going to look at the lifelong learning landscape in Germany. So stay tuned on this one. That's for the sort of the commercial part, if you want to say so. But to close this debate, because we are coming almost to an end, I would like to ask all four of you maybe to give your sort of, what would you wish for, what should happen, what is sort of the most important part for you to make this transformation to Industry 4.0 a success? What is sort of, if you had to sort of one wish for you, what is sort of the one single item, element you would like to see happen? And for this, with this, I would like to close the debate. I would give you, I mean, anyone who wants to go first. It's a tough one, but I know, Barbara, you've been nodding. Maybe you want to start off.
Of course, I can start, because for me, this is a quite simple question. If you ask me for the one issue which should be really changed on Polish labor market, it will be the unemployment benefits. Because right now, with such low unemployment benefits, when you lost job in Poland, you are just on your savings and all your family support. And you don't have this time to find a new job, to improve your skills, just to think, but you are running to find the next job. And if you there's this kind of the psychological pleasure, you have to find a job very, very quickly. It's never going to be a job that is really using your full capacity, your full skills, and so on. So one issue, increase unemployment benefits from Polish perspective.
Perfect, thank you. Who wants to go next?
May I? Oh, sorry.
Valentina, and then Julia, and then Sandrine. Okay.
Sorry. No, very, very quickly. May I point out two things? One, I think a real participation of workers, a real participation of workers in the process. And I think that we need at least a European coordination among us on that point to avoid competition on workers, given the transformation. So I think that coordination and the European instruments is what we need, really.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Julia, you are.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to first give a short last note to the topic of further training, because I very much agree to what Valentina said before. And I think, first of all, before we speak about who is maybe left in all the process, it is important, and the IG Metall is really fighting for this, that first of all, we have throughout the companies, in each and every company, that the need is set, identified. The need for further training throughout the company is systematically identified and recorded, so that you have an overview, first of all, which employees have to have access to further training, and they really all of them have access, time and resources and technical equipment. So this is the one thing. And what I would like to wish for, since it is very challenging to act now on assumptions how the future will look like, and we have different scenarios, and we should prepare at least for a bunch of them. I go with the values again, like the charter points out, and I really hope that, let's say, social responsibility and trust dominate the corporate agendas. That would be my wish, and that social and ecological sustainability that they drive are the drivers of business. This would be my wish.
Thank you. Sandrine.
Thank you.
You probably agree to the last point you just made.
I think I was trying to think how to. I think it's really important to make sure that all workers really enjoy access to social protection. Also, it will be absolutely critical with the diffusion of AI, etc., to have really access training, upskilling, etc. It will be absolutely critical, not only for low skilled, for all workers. So I think providing this social protection without preventing, I think it's quite important, people from changing jobs voluntarily. We know that it's important that the labor market, that there has to be reallocation. Jobs will be destroyed, some others will be created, etc. And this process of labor market reallocation needs to take place. So I guess this goes back almost to the old concept of flexicurity, right? The portability of rights, etc. But being able to provide to workers individually all this social protection. Also, we have in France, recently we have introduced a compte personnel de formation. I think it's in English, individual learning account, where actually those rights, those access to training are linked to individual workers and not to the company. So this is good because a person can accumulate this, and at the same time, if he or she is willing to move, voluntarily change jobs, this can happen.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, I think we touched on a lot of aspects of the future of work mostly from a trade union perspective. I learned a lot from these a little more than 1 hour. We moved from the charter to the role of trade union, to the role of labor relations and social partners. Today, we had a discussion on sort of the lifelong learning part and how to facilitate, how to support people. I hope all of you enjoyed the discussion. Those who joined us for the webinar, I hope also you panelists enjoyed us. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you also by the way, to Lisa Go, Moritz Legfeld, and Dennis Üster, who've been managing all this behind the scenes. A big thank you to the three of you for making this happen for us. The debate will probably continue. We will also hopefully have in the future more international exchanges on this. I think this is also quite important. This is also something the OECD stands for, and I'm very grateful that we have been able to do this together with the Platform Industrie 4.0. Leaves it to me to thank you all again, and hope to see you soon in a different context, in the same context, but on the same topic on how to manage and how to the transition to the future of work. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.